On August 7th, the government said the American economy lost 23,000 jobs in July. On the same page of the same report, it said the unemployment rate went down. Not a typo. Not a correction issued later. Both numbers are right. They are just not answering the same question, and almost nobody stops to say which question is which. So here's what I want to do in the next few minutes. First, show you where those two numbers actually come from, because they come from two completely different surveys that were never designed to agree. Second, show you why the first jobs number you hear every month is a draft, not a verdict. And third, show you the 3 lines further down that report that will tell you more than the headline ever does. I am not going to predict anything. I am not going to tell you where the job market is heading because I do not know, and neither does anyone reading you the headline. What I can do is show you how the number gets built, so the next time it disagrees with what you are seeing around you, you know exactly what it is measuring and what it never measured at all. Let's start with the 23,000. That number comes from a survey of employers. Every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics contacts about 121,000 businesses and government agencies and asks them one very narrow question. How many people were on your payroll during the pay period that included the 12th of the month? That is the whole question. Not how many people work here, not how many you wish you could hire. How many names were on the payroll during one specific pay period in the middle of the month? And there is a second rule that matters more than it sounds. Only employers who report 2 months in a row get counted toward the monthly change, which makes sense. You cannot measure a change using a company that only showed up once, but it means the headline number is built from a specific, moving set of businesses that happen to answer twice. So the 23,000 is a count of jobs on payroll records. If one person works 2 jobs, that person appears twice. If one person quits a full-time job and picks up 2 part-time ones, the payroll count can go up while that person's income goes down. Now the unemployment rate. It comes from somewhere else entirely. It comes from a different survey run by the Census Bureau on behalf of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. About 60,000 households every single month. Not payroll records. People at their own kitchen tables describing what they did during one particular week, the week that contained the 12th. So one survey counts jobs, the other counts people. Different sample, different question, different unit. They can move in opposite directions in the same month and both be completely accurate because they are not measuring the same object. Here is the part that does the actual work. The unemployment rate is a fraction. On top, people who do not have a job and are looking for one. On the bottom, the labor force, which means everyone with a job plus everyone looking for one. Divide the top by the bottom, and that is the rate. Watch what happened in July. In the household survey, the number of people with jobs fell by 87,000, and the labor force fell by 264,000. The bottom of the fraction shrank faster than the top, so the fraction got smaller, 4.2 down to 4.1. Nothing got better. The pool got smaller. And that raises the question the whole report actually rests on. Who counts as unemployed in the first place? There are 3 conditions, and they are written down. You had no job during the survey week. You were available to work at that time, and you made a specific, active effort to find work sometime in the previous 4 weeks. You applied somewhere. You sent something. You contacted someone. That third condition is the hinge everything turns on. The search is the entry ticket, which means if a person stops searching, they do not move into the unemployed column. They leave the arithmetic completely. They are not on the top of the fraction, and they are not on the bottom either. You can see that in the rest of July's report, the share of adults working or looking for work dropped to 61.4%, the lowest reading in more than 5 years. The number of people on temporary layoff rose by 153,000 to 921,000. And there is a category that almost never makes the news. About 1.8 million people who told the survey they want a job and looked for one at some point in the past 12 months, but not in the past 4 weeks. Within that group, 476,000 gave a specific reason for not looking. They believed there were no jobs available for them. 476,000 people who want work, who stopped looking because they concluded there was nothing there. They are not in the unemployment rate. And not because anyone decided they are fine. They are outside the number because of a question that was deleted from a form in 1945. Which brings me to the part of this story I find genuinely strange. For most of American history, there was no unemployment rate. During the worst years of the Great Depression, the federal government did not have this number. There were estimates, arguments, competing counts from competing agencies, and no agreed way to settle them. The country was in the middle of the largest employment collapse in its history and could not say how large. The first real attempt to fix that came in 1937 with a national count that used probability sampling to estimate unemployment. Then researchers at the Works Progress Administration started building something monthly. It was called the Monthly Report on the Labor Force, and it went into the field in 64 counties starting in December 1939. The first unemployment rate it ever published was for April 1940, 8.8%. The economist David Card, who wrote the history of this, put it plainly: it was not until 1940 that our modern idea of the labor force and the equating of unemployment with active job search finally emerged. That definition is younger than the Golden Gate Bridge. Now here is the detail that stopped me. That original 1940 survey did ask people why they were not looking for work, and it counted two groups of non-searchers as unemployed anyway: people who were temporarily ill, and people who believed no work was available for them. The discouraged were counted. In the very first version of this number, the people who had stopped looking because they thought there was nothing out there were unemployed, officially on the record. In July 1945, the questionnaire was redesigned. Interviewers had been jumping to conclusions about what people did, so the questions were rewritten to be more concrete. And in that redesign, the question about why you were not searching was dropped. As a direct consequence, discouraged workers stopped being counted as unemployed, and that is still true today, 81 years later. In 1967, the survey went further and penned the search window to the previous 4 weeks, which is the rule still in force. So the line between unemployed and not in the labor force is not a law of nature. It is a decision about which questions fit on a form. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly the point where somebody usually reaches for a conspiracy. This is not one. The people who made that decision wrote down their reasons and published them. Critics argued with them at the time. One economist, Clarence Long, wrote in 1942 that the father of this number was more likely to be statistical expediency than economic theory, social philosophy, or even government policy. That objection is in the public record from the beginning. It is not hidden. It is just never mentioned again once the number reaches the news. So that is the first number. Now the second problem, which is that even the jobs count changes after they publish it. In that same August report, May and June were quietly rewritten. May was revised down by 66,000 to a gain of 63,000. June was revised down by 37,000 to a gain of 20,000. Together, 103,000 jobs that were reported and then were not there. And that happens because of a trade the statisticians made on purpose between speed and completeness. The first estimate goes out within 3 weeks of the month it describes. 3 weeks. Which means it is built on somewhere between 10 and 16 days of collecting answers. Here's what that looks like in practice. In 2024, the average collection rate for the first estimate was 60.4%. For the second estimate, 89%. For the third and final one, 90.9%. In order, that is, 60%, then 89, then 91. The first number we hear is not wrong the way a mistake is wrong. It is early, the way a partial count is early. The revision is not the system failing. The revision is the rest of the mail arriving. There is a related fact that gets misreported constantly, so let me put it precisely. Response rates to that employer survey have fallen from about 58% before 2020 to 43% in 2024. That is real, and the statisticians are worried about it. But the agency is explicit that falling response rates are not the cause of the monthly revisions. The cause of revisions is late data from employers who do eventually answer. Two different problems, worth keeping straight, because one of them gets used to imply the numbers are fake, and it does not actually say that. Then there is the question of who is late. Researchers looked for a pattern among private employers and could not find a consistent one, not by industry, not by size, not by region, not by how they file, but they did find one clear exception. Government employers are often late reporters, and in August 2025, when there was an unusually large revision to 2 months of data, nearly half of it came from government employment, mostly local and state government education. Now hold that next to July's report. The single biggest drop in July was government, down 53,000, and inside that, Local government education, down 50,000. I am not telling you that will be revised. I have no idea, and anyone who claims to is guessing. What I am telling you is that the largest line in this month's report sits in the exact category that has historically produced the biggest rewrites. So that is the line I will check first when the next report lands. There is one more moving part worth knowing about. Some businesses are too new to be in the survey sample yet, and others have quietly closed and simply stopped answering. Since 2003, the agency models that churn using historical patterns of business openings and closings. Most of the time, that model makes the early estimates better, but the agency says plainly that during periods of rapid change, in either direction, it can make them worse. The model is built in how things usually go, which is exactly when it is least useful. So how big is all this normally? Since 2003, the average gap between the first estimate and the third is 51,000 jobs, in one direction or the other. The largest downward revision in that whole period was March 2020, when the first estimate missed by 672,000, because the pandemic was rewriting the economy faster than the mail could carry it. And once a year, all of it gets checked against something much harder than a survey: unemployment insurance tax records, which employers are legally required to file, covering roughly 95% of American jobs. That annual reconciliation is the closest thing we have to a real count. Everything before it is an estimate trying to be fast. Which brings me to the useful part. If the headline is answering a narrow question, what should we read instead? 3 lines, all published on the same day, all free. The first is the participation rate. That one line tells you whether the unemployment rate moved because people found work or because people stopped looking. Same rate, 2 completely different worlds, and only that line separates them. The second is the group I mentioned earlier, the people who want a job but have not searched in the last 4 weeks, and the count of those who stopped because they believed nothing was available. That is also where the broader measure lives, the one that adds people who want work but are not searching, plus people working part-time who want full-time hours. It is always higher than the headline rate, and it is always in the same release. The third is the revision line, not this month's number, what last month's number turned out to be. That is the one that tells you which direction the picture keeps getting corrected. And if you only have 30 seconds, look at the 12-month average instead of the single month. Over the past year, the economy has averaged about 34,000 new jobs a month. 1 month is noise. The average is this story. So, back to August 7th, 2 numbers on one page pointing opposite ways. Jobs fell because employers reported fewer names on payroll. The rate fell because more people left the search than lost work. Those 2 facts were never in an argument with each other, and neither were you and the headline. If finding work looks harder than 4.1% makes it sound, that is not a misreading. The rate answers how many people are still looking. Nobody ever built it to answer how hard it is to find something. That was decided in April 1940, when somebody had to write the question down and pick one.